Broadcasting live from the command center located in Jacksonville, Florida, this is Military Witnesses to UAP. I am your host, Shannon Scott. And backed by popular demand, located deep in the Missouri woods, my right-hand man, Rob Heatherly. We both have assumed the duties and responsibilities of continuing the conversation. So, buckle up, hold my beer, hang on, and let's get started with today's briefings. Hey, everybody, welcome. Yeah. We got Christopher Sharp. Christopher Sharp is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Liberation Times, senior contributing journalist at Daily Mail. He's located in London. Links will be provided in the description below with his Twitter information. So if you want to contact him, down below. Welcome, Christopher. It's glad to see you, sir.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure being on with you guys. I know that Lou's got a lot of love for you guys, and a lot of people that Lou loves, I love as well. So, and also, one of the pleasures of doing what I do is speaking to military veterans like yourselves. And it's just that I'm truly humbled by hearing the accounts from what you guys are being through and sacrificed, and I'm awestruck. So, thank you for having me on.
No, the pleasure's ours. Lou highly recommends you as well. So you come well recommended, and they know about our viewers know who we are. Tell us about yourself, Liberation Times, how you got into this.
Yeah. So I got some really bad light gain today. I'm so sorry, and I'm in my sunscreen. So this is why I write. That's the way that I present. Liberation. I'm a communications professional firstly, so I come at this from a background of doing corporate communications, public relations, and I still freelance doing that stuff. And what I did was I quit my job just over a year ago now, and I decided to just set up my own kind of news website reporting on UFOs. And it's just evolved into something that I never expected it to be. And I'm really, really happy with the place it's in at the moment. And all I do really is I just report, the topic of unidentified aerial phenomena like any other news story. So just reporting it without the stigmatized language, basically, and taking it seriously. So that's where I come from. And while I was doing that, I attracted the attention of the Daily Mail as well, which is the biggest English-speaking online news publication in the world. So got quite a good platform to get some quality UFO stories out there.
Awesome. Because in the past here in America, when the reporters would say anything about UFOs, UAPs is kind of like a new term since 2017, but it would be like a Geiger factor. They would play X-Files music, and it seems like these days it's being taken a little bit more serious. Do you see that as well? And you're on the other side of the lake there?
It's not really a topic that comes up much in the United Kingdom. It's not, and it's in your country where the progress is being made. That's where the stigma is disappearing at the moment.
Yeah.
In the UK, it's not even an issue. You saw some brief news segments and reports on English television when the UAP report came out, and that was it really. But I would say in terms of news press, we're probably a bit better when it comes to that. I mean, you've got like some good reporters in The Sun, some good reporters in the Daily Mail as well. But mostly we're just reporting on what goes on in the United States, if anything, instead of what goes on in this country. But we did manage to make the hearings, a hearing that occurred this year. We managed to make that the main headline in the Daily Mail, like the one that was right up there, which is great. We've never had that for a UAP story before in the UK press. So I was quite proud about that.
I'm looking forward to the next one too, whenever that is.
Soon.
Mm-hmm. It almost seems like, I know that the United States media, mainstream media the government has a lot of influence on it. And it seems that there's two sides of the disclosure coin. One side wants it out, one doesn't, and there's a fight for supremacy. And we have our Five Eyes partners and things like that, that follow the lead of the United States. We have a lot of influence, and with the world, especially our government. So what news stories they want on the wire going out, around the planet, they can kind of regulate that. Which seems to be the case with the UK, is that you guys are being fed filtered information to minimize this topic as much as possible and not get it out there.
Yeah, that's correct. And we had the Condine report here, which tried to put the topic to bed through explaining these things through plasma, and the science was very, very flawed on that. And it was just very, very poorly done. I mean, you had like second and third hand accounts of encounters of UAP from Chinese and like that on there. And the leading theory was plasma science, something that wasn't really, it was really just pure speculation, really. And they used that entire report to help shut down the UAP investigation done, at least publicly, from the UK government, which was really disappointing. And we're just at a place now where the UK government basically says that we don't see UAP as a national threat and stuff like that. And it's really, really disappointing. But I'm hoping that enough progress will happen in the US whereby the UK government can no longer have its head in the sand when it comes to this stuff.
Condon report you talk about, it came out around 1970, and that was with Project Blue Book, where they came out. It's interesting because I went back and read the whole document twice recently. It states that there is nothing of scientific value and no threat to the United States to warrant further research. And the guy that wrote the paper, he wrote that one case could not be explained with human foresight or knowledge, because it was the one where the multiple craft were approaching the UK toward a military base. That one was unequivocally not human and intelligent design. It was orchestrated. It had intelligence behind it of basically a UFO that they couldn't discount. It was an account that one, to the person that wrote the Condon report, he indicated that was not human and it wasn't natural. It was artificial, and he couldn't deny that one. But isn't it strange how people take that report, and they used weasel words how they wrote that. They said there was no scientific value to it and no threat, so ergo they're going to drop it. But all they did was drop the name in public and went underground with it, and they never stopped researching it. So they never denied that aliens exist, or that there was something there, or that there was something scientific to gain. They just stated that publicly, scientifically, which may have been the case at the time, they hit a wall with trying to reverse engineer some of the stuff, and they officially took a hiatus from it. But we know now that that's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, sorry, the UK one, it's Project Condine. Sorry, they did a report on it. It's called Project Condine. And it was very, very funny because Condine does sound a lot like Condon. And that's the theory that why it was called Condine, because it was very, very similar to the US version. But yeah, you're exactly bang on there. It made very, very similar conclusions to the Condon report. And it's very interesting. And that was done to close down the UK investigation as well. So that came out in early 2000. I think it's 2001 that came out. Yeah. So that's some interesting parallels there. But from my understanding, like this stuff is still happening all the time, and the UK is very, very well aware of it through, both intelligence that we have and also perhaps through Five Eyes intelligence as well.
Mm-hmm. What emerged to propagate that to come out in the UK? To have that advance, because they wouldn't advance that in a vacuum. What triggered them to do that? Was there a sighting, or was it gaining traction within the populace or something to warrant them to want to try and throw water on the fire, so to speak, before it took root?
Yeah, I think so. I think like when Nick Pope came out, and you had Rendlesham a few years before, and it seemed that the military was dealing with these things, so you had public line at that point where by the military is directly investigating UAP incidents, and I think they just thought it was taking resources away, or at least that was the public line of what was occurring. But from my understanding, the investigation probably hasn't really stopped, and it's probably just going by a different name now. They may even have a different acronym that they're using now. For instance, we know the US will probably most likely, hopefully, be changing the acronym from UAP to UAUP quite soon. So that's quite interesting. So that's why I think that occurred. But there are some other reasons actually, I think, which are there in the history that I can't think of at the moment. But there is an interesting history behind the phenomenon in the UK. I mean, Prince Philip, for example, he was fascinated by UAP, and he got one of his advisors to look up cases back in the 1950s. A guy called Sir Peter Horsley, and he was a decorated veteran from World War II, RAF, and he went on to be he was the Air Vice Marshal for the United Kingdom, and he was basically in command of nuclear assets to some extent, which is really interesting. And he came out of the story that he met an alien called Janus in the 1950s, and he went for a joke, but he was curious as well because he had got this invite to meet this alien, and he met a human person called Janus, and said, "Oh, okay, well, this is an alien," but he went along anyway. He went with it, and he said that he came away from that meeting convinced that it was not human. That this person, very, very dashing looking in a suit and whatnot, he said that this person seemed to be able to read his thoughts. And before Sir Peter Horsley could ask this person a question, the guy answered the question before he could even speak the question. Stuff like that. And this is coming from someone who's highly decorated, really, really, someone who knows what they're doing and hasn't lost their faculties. And after this incident, and he reported this incident as well to Prince Philip, from my understanding, he went on to be kind of like Air Vice Marshal. And okay, well, I mean, you can definitely take away from that this guy was saying he was competent and he's making so there's something going on here.
Was he still advancing that story once he was promoted, or did he go silent on it? Did he ever stop talking about it, or did he stick with it till he died? I mean, I'm assuming he's not alive anymore.
Yeah, that's correct. So it didn't come out in public until he released his. Well, I imagine firstly that Prince Philip and others knew about it. They reported it back to them, but in public it didn't come out until he published his biography, which I think may have been in the early 90s, where he talked about the incident. But it is really, really interesting. Just the stuff that's come out of that, and there's some other people as well within the British military that previously spoken out about it as well. I hope to dig in more into the UK cases in the upcoming months and years. Hopefully, do some more digging, see what's going on there to get some more traction in the UK.
Don't you find that curious that some of the United States' best cases that we stand on now after 2017, when New York Times Leslie Kean broke that article of glowing auras and black money or dark money, something to that effect, where it was the opening modern ufology information that was actually bearing facts for the first time in modern history that could be discerned and gleaned out and teased out of the government. That before that it was like classical physics, with general relativity. Then you get Einstein. Then we have modern physics. It seems a pivotal point with that article that opened the firing shot of modern ufology and fact-based research. But a lot of our cases that have been advanced since then have been like the Condon report from 1970, cases that were in the UK and like Rendlesham Forest. So isn't it ironic that a lot of our most seminal cases that are being advanced with fact are based out of the UK and vice versa? You guys, use a lot of our cases, and a lot of that is orchestrated because we have found out that the Air Force and the government had a 75-year disinformation campaign to try and discredit this topic. which is very unfortunate because it made such an air of stigma and ridicule that now people, you have generations of scientists, academics, and witnesses that don't want to tell their stories because there's still that locker room giggle factor when you come out with this that could ruin your career or your reputation. So they're all waiting for somebody else to step out and take the hit, like Gary Nolan has, before they put their reputations online. And he's led by example. He's a stellar example of stepping out there, not giving a damn what people think about you, and doing what's right instead of what's popular, even to his detriment. But like Travis Taylor, he doesn't, and Lou, they don't care. And Christopher Mellon, the truth needs to come out. There's a reason that we are at this place in this modern epoch of humanity, that this story is becoming so kinetic that we're at a place in history that is pivotal to our survival or our ruination, and we don't know which one yet.
Absolutely. I mean, I come at this story from two angles, really. The first being that this is a huge scandal on epic proportions. And when you're reporting on a scandal, who do you go to? You go to the whistleblowers. Mm-hmm. So I go to the whistleblowers when I'm talking about this. And by the way, Lou is 100% legit. He has never provided me any false information at all. And he is a totally 100% reliable source, which other journalists have found as well. And I would say that, himself and other whistleblowers are going to be critical in kind of getting this story out in the upcoming weeks, months, and years ahead. Secondly, I would like to say as well that we're at a time, like personally, I feel that we're at a time where this is not sustainable. I mean, we've had nuclear weapons for, I think, 8 decades now. And we've come so close to destruction so many times. I don't think we're going to last another 100 years with these weapons. This is not sustainable. Something needs to change. Yeah. And I feel like this is something that could kind of kickstart that change in terms of where we are at the moment as a human race, to say, look, we either live or we die. But if we're going to live as humanity and save the earth, we need to make some changes, and we need to change the current setting that we're on.
Chris, one of the discussions that Rob and I have had is exactly this. How is this going to play out? It's not like we're going to give up our nukes because the Russians have nukes, right? So it's kind of like a scenario. I know you're a lot younger than we are. I'm going to be 53 in another month. I saw a movie when I was younger. It was called Superman Quest for Peace. Are you familiar with that movie?
I probably may have seen it when I was younger.
Okay. What happened was Superman had enough. He went around and he gathered all the nukes. He put them in a big bag and he threw them into the sun. That's the only way. I mean, unless Superman can, show up and just get rid of everything, all the nukes, no one's going to get rid of the nukes. That's the only scenario that I see.
We're going to need outside intelligent intervention to save the human species, because we are the atomic clock is almost ready to strike midnight, more so than it's ever been since we developed nuclear weapons, that we can not only decimate ourselves, but now we can completely sanitize this planet and make it like Mars, a complete dead planet. It's not, every organic on it is laid to waste, and all indications show that we are not alone with intelligent species that have been hidden for a long time and veiled from us, but this is their home too. And it looks like they're advanced scouting that they want to protect their planet and their existence. So, Earth is like an oasis in a desert, and they're not going to give that up lightly. So people mock me for my religion and things, but there are parallels in Revelations and then scriptures that talk about being able to strip flesh and bone, and needed to come back and basically have the harvest, because humanity otherwise are going to decimate themselves. So there are religious connotations of an intervention in the modern day now, and also in the ufology community, in pagan religions and in mythology. All of those have similar tales of end times stories that it depends on what humans do to determine their fate, of whether we pass the test or we fail it. And another age of man falls into mythology and wiped from the planet, and then we become myth. And maybe the only thing left would be the pyramid and Hoover Dam that shows that we ever existed, in 10,000 years.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I think I've looked at Christianity actually, and I mean, I think many people, even if they don't see themselves as Christian or label themselves as that, a lot of the things that we kind of like take for granted as being like wrong and right and how to live our lives, being shaped by Christianity. It's like kind of the fishbowl that we're swimming in, really.
Yeah.
Like a lot of human rights laws and stuff like that. Well, a lot of law in general has basically come out of a lot of the evolution of Christianity.
How to coexist, how to try and ultimately coexist with your fellow humans and live in peace, not war, and admonish that. And that is in every productive religion and mythology that we've ever heard known to man. If they have those basic tenets of human nature to ascribe to, that would be lending toward our survival, and to turn away from that is ruination. You don't have to believe in the religions, but the message has been handed down through time that's very clear, that in the symbologies, in the esoteric languages, in the hermetic texts and the religious texts, they all say the same thing, that there were ancient wars among gods. Humanity has been put to the brink of extinction many times. And if we don't learn to coexist, we're going to be destroyed again. There will be a harvest. And, if worst case scenario, say that we get intervention from an intelligent species that isn't like what we imagine as a god, that would come out and want to defend themselves, if they are for whatever reason they don't interfere in the affairs of humanity overtly, they could theoretically step out, deproliferate, step back in and disappear, and never announce who they are or anything to that effect, and then let there would be an immediate imbalance of power among the nations. Like Iran would immediately invade Israel without their nukes. All hell would break loose. So are they going to unleash hell, or are they going to occupy like we did going into Iraq and Afghanistan? Would they come and occupy and keep the peace, or would they take out the militaries or the entire civilization? We don't know, but it does appear they won't let us sanitize this planet. And people think I'm full of crap basically for thinking this, but when you're taught basic tactics and your history, it all ascribes to that kind of a scenario of happening.
Can I ask you something? Can I ask you a question? So do you believe that the Holloman Air Force Base encounter really occurred, in which they were filming over Holloman Air Force Base? You see the UFO come in and it lands, and some beings come out and greet people from the base, and they go in somewhere. Because I asked that because if that did happen, then that assumes that we've already made contact with beings. And then it brings up the question, okay, so what do they want? Someone knows what they want if that contact has been established. And then it brings up the question, okay, if contact has been established, who's managing that contact?
Or how many different factions have contacted humanity, and a few made pacts for the whole without our consent or our knowledge even. Yeah. That Holman, I keep hearing echoes that was the real deal and authentic, which has tremendous implications because they were wearing Egyptian headdresses and things. And I know for a fact that the pre-dynastic, the Egyptians did not build the megaliths. They didn't build the pyramids and all the statuary and all that. They even state that they inherited that in every culture, the Mayans, the Aztecs, Peru, China, India, they all ascribed that they inherited these sites. They didn't build them. That was the age of the gods that did that. And that would give validity of the Holman event to echo back towards who really built the Egyptian monuments, the pyramids, the statuary. It looks like they were memorializing themselves. And then you have all these ancient myths and things of like Yahweh versus Baal. for Baalbek, and then with the Egyptians, and then you have the Hindu gods. All indications, but all these temples laid to waste all over the European continent and Eurasia. They're just decimated, and there are signs of high energy weapons and warfare going on. So you can't dismiss that at face value, given that now we are seeing the same evidence of intelligent beings that have highly advanced capabilities. You have the same thing in megaliths and monoliths in ancient and antiquity that have saw marks, that have tool marks, that have power drills. None of that can be done with hand powered equipment. And when they roll out the toolkit for Egypt in 3,000 years, they have the same tools of copper chisels and diorite pounding balls. Since, when I started building cars at 15, I had a little toolbox that had a pair of vice grips, crescent wrench, a few odd and end wrenches that I could pick up, a couple of screwdrivers and pliers and a crowbar. I built a car with that crap. But over the years, I've got a whole garage full of tools now worth probably $10,000-$20,000 easily. My tool set has evolved over time because I could think of better ways to be doing this crap if I had the resources. And when I was able, I added to my toolkit. Isn't it odd that the toolkit never changed in Egypt in 3,000 years, and you can't build a pyramid with the tools they trot out?
They didn't have Home Depot, you know that.
Yeah, they didn't have bonus points.
Yeah. I mean, look, first I would say that I'm putting on my journalist hat. I've got to put that away, and like, I can't report that in a Daily Mail. However, this is the stuff I love to speculate about the most.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you talk to a lot of journalists, especially like those, those who dip into the phenomena, a lot of them are just like, oh, I don't want to know about this. It's just, they just brushed aside and stuff. But
yeah,
for me, like if you brush this stuff aside, I mean, people still do that with like Wilson and Davis and things like that. If you brush it aside, even if you think that it might not be true, if you rule it out completely, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Firstly, if you're right all the time, if you were right even 55% of the time, as Dale Carnegie once said, you'd be winning the lottery and you'd be a million or billionaire or something like that if you're right 55% of the time. So firstly, people have to understand that they can't be right all the time, and you don't know what you don't know. And if you rule it out, then you basically do yourself a disservice, because you may not follow that lead that another journalist who is more open-minded will get when it comes to that stuff. But personally, I think it's just absolutely extraordinary. I watch a lot of Graham Hancock, and we're talking pre-show about the Adam and Eve book as well. I find that stuff absolutely fascinating. And have we been in this position before where civilization's got this advanced? That's something.
Yeah,
that
you got proof of that, and you got proof of that in a UK museum with the Flinders Petrie Core Drill 7 that has helical spirals on it that shows that it was a high pressure. It could only be created with a high pressure, like 5,000 pounds of force, and at a feed rate with a diamond tip type cutting edge that would give the helical coil impressions where it spirals down and digs in at a uniform feed rate. We don't have equipment today that could replicate that force and that cut. We could create it, but it would be very expensive. And the other seminal case, like with my what they call alternative ancient history, one of we choose the most provable artifacts to make our case with. And in the Serapeum of Saqqara, there's the 24 sarcophagi that are on average 100 tons each. Their insides are optically flat to 0.002 of an inch of flatness. They are optically flat. We don't have that kind of precision unless we're making equipment for space, NASA and things. We didn't even have the ability to machine things on that level until after the 70s or so that we advanced. But to make something, and they have like a 1/4 inch radius on the inside of the boxes, and they're perfectly squared up on every side. Yeah, they're 30-ton lids. We have no way of replicating, and they were inside of a man-made underground tunnel, to where they went down a very narrow passage and turned and went into this causeway and put each one of these in the niches. in a lot of cases, there's only a foot on either side and 2 feet on to the ceiling. How would you move a 100-ton box through those narrow corridors and turn them and put them in these little niches that are below the floor, even about at 3 feet? And
Wow.
some of them came 500 miles from the quarry. And when Christopher Dunn inquired with a stone company that manufactures things of that nature, they said they could do it, but they're going to have to do it in 5 pieces, because even quarrying a billet of raw material of 100 tons to take out of a quarry would almost be an impossibility to cut and to move. It would cost millions of dollars, because they would have to build special equipment, special vehicles, special roads, heavy lifting equipment. All that would have to come into play. And like Baalbek, you got the Trillathon that are average 1,300 to 15 tons or 1,500 tons each. They're 40 feet up in the air on top of a course of 400-foot blocks. Roman, their ability to, their cranes and things that the Romans are attributed with building, you can't get enough cranes on stones that large to move them, enough humans and animals to elevate a 1,600-ton stone to that height. It's impossible with the mechanisms that they had. There are no roads to these megaliths. They had to have been by air. There's no other way. So you're talking about anti-gravity, and some of them, they found high metal alloys in the saw cuts of some of these megaliths that proved there were advanced tools being used to create those.
I wanted to let you know that my opinion, I used to be an investigator in the military for 20 years, and the Wilson Davis notes, I'm 99 point, what's that?
What was your job and your rank?
Oh, I was a petty officer first class. It was the E6, but my last job was the chief master at arms on board the USS Clackrin. When it comes to the Holloman, I'm 98% sure. And just because I heard all the testimony, I've seen the video. I've never seen anything like that flew like that, like a leaf. You know, it could be something earthly. Rob and I have talents in certain areas. Mine is video and photo manipulation and stuff. So what I want to do is go and get that video, and I want to get those individual frames from that. Then I'll do a photo merge and make one big photo out of all that footage, right? And then I'm going to try to line it up on Google Earth. I want to see exactly where that cameraman was standing. I think that'd be a pretty cool job, or a research job for me to do. Have you had any? Have you heard any incidents or incursions of this phenomenon at your nuclear sites there, on your side of the pond?
I mean, you could say that Rendlesham was an incursion over a nuclear site, as there were apparently missiles stored. Well, there were, but I don't know if anyone's stated officially that or not yet. But yeah, there were nuclear missiles there. So yeah, but also, I mean, I grew up in Reading, in Berkshire, and I grew up quite close to where we have a place called AWE, which is where it used to be run by Lockheed, from my understanding, and it's where a lot of the nuclear weapons are stored from the UK, and they do a lot of work around there in terms of the nukes. You know, my brother has seen things over there. He sent me a video a few months ago of a sighting of something over in the direction of AWE. There are objects moving around really, really fast, and it was crazy. If you look through our local newspaper, I mean, you can look on the website getreading.co.uk, and you search UFO, you see lots of incidents in the Reading area. I mean, this is all in quite close, the UK is all in quite close proximity. You would imagine if you saw, a UFO within 30 miles of Malmstrom in the US, or, even within 50 or 40, you'd be like, oh yeah, it was quite close to Malmstrom. So you could probably make the same argument of AWE in the UK. If you saw something over London, it could be linked to AWE, for instance, because of we're such a small island. And yeah, so there are eyewitness statements. And there was something that came out a few months ago as well, that there were a number of drone incursions over nuclear sites in the UK. So that I found that quite interesting as well. So this is all of interest, but no one's really followed it up to really investigate it as a journalist. But I guess that is as well because no one wants to get in trouble through the UK government, and the UK government does have the apparatus as well. If it doesn't want a story in the press, it does have the power to put like a D notice on it and saying you're not allowed to report.
As you've progressed with your journalism and reporting, do you feel like there's been a little bit of pressure for you to kind of back off the story a little bit, or not to expand it too far,
Good question.
where you feel like you're limited on what you can say without losing your job or your reputation, that there's been pressure applied to you from anywhere?
Never. I think the place I'm coming from is I'm just trying to protect my sources. So I will not put a story out if it compromises any of my sources. And I'm very, very extra protective about that. And that's the one, that's the one thing I won't tread on.
I'm having trouble hearing.
But I mean, in terms of something that I've been told not to dig into, no, that's never come up before. But in terms of pushback, I don't know. Like when I talk to the Pentagon and Susan Goff, for instance, you can feel that when they're not comfortable to talk about something. So I had a number of questions about the U.S. Air Force's involvement with UAP, for instance, and they did some pilot program, for example, to take reports in of UFOs over a hotspot area where they're commonly sighted, and that's been reported before. And it was even mentioned in the UAP report by the UAPTF. But when I asked questions about whether that program that they did was a success, whether they carried on with it or not, what did they find out about it? It's just you get nothing. They just don't want to answer the question at all. US Air Force doesn't, and I've been trying to get that answer for months. And then the same thing with Lou and Space Force as well. So there was a lot of people chasing that story, and I know that Dan Warren had been chasing it for about 5 months or so, and the Pentagon kept on saying that, oh yeah, we'll get back to you next week, or we'll get back to you this week, and it was just like being taken for a ride basically. And from my understanding, the Pentagon knew the answer all along. Lou does work for Space Force as an advisory basis, and it was very difficult to get an answer from the Pentagon on that, confirming his status with Space Force. So what I had to do in the end is I had to actually make an official complaint to the DoD saying, look, all I want is a simple answer. It should not be that hard to confirm whether Lou works in any capacity with Space Force. And I copied in the DoD IG, and I copied in a congressional person as well on one of the key committees, saying that this is a complaint, and it goes against the DoD public office's own kind of protocols and handling the press. Yeah. That they're supposed to be transparent where possible. If they got information, they're supposed to give it to you as long as it doesn't compromise national security, from my understanding. And they were not. They seemed to not be comfortable about giving that information, which to me
isn't that ironic?
Yeah,
isn't that ironic that they put Susan Go in charge of funneling everything on the topic of UAPs, or Lou Elizondo through her desk? From anything that originates out of the military now, it's funneled through her, and that it's no coincidence, in my opinion. She wrote a paper in 2003 because her MOS was PSYOPs, that you can't separate public affairs from PSYOPs. They are one and the same. That's got to be manipulated, which, by the way, is illegal in the United States for the government to do that.
Yeah. So for professional purposes, I will say that there's nothing personal about Susan Goff. If you look at all the journalists she gives information to, I'm probably the one who manages to get most from her. So I'm really thankful that she is upfront with me and providing those answers. But as well, there's things that have come out of the Public Affairs Office that's been signed off. Because remember, when Susan Goff is given an answer, it needs to be signed off by someone. So who's signing
Right.
off this information?
So
Who's giving it to her? From my understanding, there are still some really bad eggs within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. Even though that Gary Reid's on, there are still some people in there who are not good eggs. And that worries me in terms of Arrow as well. I think that there is the possibility that Kirkpatrick may have been he not being misled, but he may be working in an office full of people who do not want this out, and he's scoffing at it, and they're probably trying to lead him in a certain direction. It doesn't seem like a really healthy environment to me, and just kind of like having things getting to the bottom of it.
I'm not criticizing her as a person because I don't know her. I'm focusing on her behavior, and and I understand following orders and being a good soldier. That you have the UCMJ to go by and not violate that or your oath of enlistment, and that she's following orders, and she thinks in her mind she's doing what's best for the American people from her vantage point. It's just that U.S. laws and things, we see things differently from different perspectives. That most laws, like words, are not set in stone. They're like a crystal that can be looked at from many different angles and facets. Depending on how you use it, is going to have a different perspective and vision of how people see it. So
yeah, absolutely. I think what you have to do is you have to look at their own kind of like guidance in terms and protocols in terms of how they should deal with the press, and if they don't abide by those set of principles that they're supposed to, you have to call them out, make complaints, push them on it, because they're not being forthcoming with information. Then that's not a good thing, especially on the UAP topic. Remember, if they're trying to frame this as something that's not a threat. If they are trying to frame that, I mean, you've seen the U.S. Air Force, Frank Kendall trying to frame it in that way, and it's not a threat. I've got other
or that the phenomena doesn't even exist. That it's all explainable, but through natural means and things. And that conversation to the educated and initiated on this topic already know it's a foregone conclusion. We are dealing with sentient beings that are advanced, far above us, that we didn't prior have any direct knowledge of, and that's just now coming back into the human conscience and knowledge base, that these things exist, and are having increasing their frequency, their volume, their proximity. They're getting more and more overt in larger and larger numbers. They're telegraphing intent. If this were the U.S. or the U.K. or allies prepping a battlefield to go into a country, whether it's a positive or negative thing, they've got to advance scout it. They've got to know what their capabilities are, what their fears, what their hopes are, do it, and then make a plan for going in. And worst case scenario, if they're like uncontacted tribes that are going to attack because they don't know any different humans exist besides them, you got to be prepared for the worst. Even if you're doing a humanitarian mission, that there's going to be somebody that isn't going to go willingly along with what your plan is, per se.
Absolutely, and I think you've hit on a key point here. The number of occurrences is going up. I think the word used in the Senate Intelligence Committee's explanatory report was exponentially, and Jeremy Corbell's also stated there's been a rise in terms of instances. And that's really dangerous. That's really, really dangerous, because we've got ourselves at the moment a precarious situation in Ukraine. One misunderstanding of a fast-flying object flying over the Russian border on its way to Moscow could be it could cause confusion, and it could cause a really, really bad situation, let's say. And I worry about that. And you've got theaters of operation, let's say, like in the Middle East, for example, where the Russians and the Americans are side by side, and these things could potentially trigger a war. Let's hope there's some more procedures in place to stop from this misunderstanding that could take place. But when you're in an environment where it's as tense as this, I mean, who knows?
You
I
got
mean,
seconds.
yeah.
You got seconds to decide one way or the other. You have to rely on your training and your instincts.
Absolutely. And if you've got so many of them in the sky now that they're increasing exponentially, then how do you track them all as well? How do you keep on top of this?
And how could the Air Force claim that they don't know what this is when they have the entire planet surveilled for decades now, from middle Earth orbit down, persistently live, every square inch of the planet? They have vision on that. Like with the Nimitz encounter in 2004, they can't deny that, they've said they don't have any information to offer the Navy, openly anyway. But how can they deny that they didn't see those craft that the Navy were observing for weeks in upper Earth, in low Earth orbit at 100,000 feet, and I think Kevin Day counted over 100 during that period. They were dropping down in group 6 to 12. The Air Force, you can't tell me that they didn't see that. They had to have. We've got the two most powerful sources of electromagnetic energy on the planet are the radar systems based on either side of our country, outwardly facing the ocean, which was right there over that battle space training area. They can't say that they didn't see this. They have their software set to pick up nuclear bombers and ICBMs, but there's nothing to say they couldn't write a program to sort out these type craft as well, or that they aren't filtering them and putting it into a different folder. But if that's taking place, they aren't admitting it, but they have to have the data, and they could sort that with modern computers and things. That wouldn't be a hard task to do. So
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
have to have vision on this.
Oh my gosh, you just hit on such a key point there. Yes. And former DNI John Radcliffe, for example, was citing some of that satellite technology and what they'd seen. And I mean, you've got a case at the moment where Congress is complaining because there's plenty of reports in terms of, oh yes, we've seen UAP or videos and whatnot, but still there's no firm answer in terms of the origin. Where do these things originate from? Who are the operators? And you get the feeling. Let's take the July 2019 instance over the West Coast, for example. Look, I've got an open mind on that. It could be prosaic drones, although it wasn't from the Chinese ship, the Bass Strait. The FBI did search that, so it's Coast Guard. But look, whether it was Chinese technology or if it's something less prosaic, where did it come from? And this is something that they can't answer. But at the same time, they've got the technology to answer that, because someone must have seen it on the satellite system. Someone must have seen where it came from. Someone has the technology, surely, to know where these things originated from, whether it was from some Chinese platform or from under the ocean, from somewhere else. Who knows? But someone ought to have that information. There's no way that the biggest superpower on Earth cannot tell you where something came from. Look at the East Coast, for example, what they're seeing over the East Coast. Where do they go to? Where do they come from? Someone has to have these answers, surely. Where did they go? Where did they come from? That's just
our Air Force. Our Air Force can track an object at 10 centimeters up to 20,000 miles away, and they track multiple, like 20. I think it's like 24,000 objects now. They're cataloged in
space junk as well.
Continuously. Yeah, the space junk, anything over 10 centimeters or larger, they track. They've got thousands of these that they follow in real time persistently. They know where everything's at. They know when to tell the space station, hey, hit the gas. You need to move aside a little bit. There's some junk coming through. If they can do that with a bolt, then damn sure they know what's in our atmosphere that's hundreds of meters across. I mean, look what the Japanese airliner saw over Alaska that was the size of aircraft carriers.
absolutely
mind-blowing.
It really is. And you just have to ask yourself, what is going on here? What is going on? You saw a recent report as well from Ross Coulthart, excellent journalist, and who was reporting an incident over Ukraine during the battle for Irpin, where the bridges, and there was a large object. I think it was described by a British veteran and volunteer who is serving with a multinational force. It's described as a really, really bright light, about 1,000 feet up, and seemed cylindrical shaped, although it was difficult working out its shape because it was quite dark, but it was nighttime. But like what you were saying before, I mean, it seemed to be going very, very slow. And it was about 1,000 feet up, and it seemed to be doing some kind of surveillance or something like that, perhaps.
Mhm.
The interesting thing is that no one seemed to shoot at it. I mean, it's understandable that no one wanted to
funny
shoot
that,
at
huh?
the
Isn't that
location.
ironic? Did you hear that story that early during the invasion that there was a guy telling his dad that they witnessed a from the sky and it took out an entire column, that they said it was prayers answered by God, that they were getting ready to be overran, and this giant lightning bolt that they described, he kind of alluded there might have been a craft at the top of it, but he was also saying that he felt like he was praying for salvation, that they wouldn't be decimated by this column that was rolling in. And in the dead of night, this blinding flash took out the entire column. And they said they might have made out a craft at the top of that, maybe not, but there's like 6 minutes of footage of that on the internet cruising around that talk about that incident. It's wild.
Bloody hell! Send that to me. I think I vaguely remember
I wanna
something
see
like
that too.
If there's 6 minutes of it, that's quite important. I mean, as a journalist, what I'd do if I was looking into that story, I'd need excellent. No, if you can send that to me, I mean, as a journalist, what I'd need to do is I'd need to find the source of that, who did it, who filmed it, who was the person, were there any corroborating witnesses, for example, what brigade or whatever did these troops that were wiped out, where they come from? Just that's what I'd need to do to report something like that. Was there anyone else who videoed it? Was there anyone else who didn't know the witnesses, who could also corroborate? That's what we have to do, especially in this day and age where you're getting so many videos and stuff, and it's so difficult to authenticate the videos and stuff. And that's what makes this topic so difficult to report on sometimes. But it'd be great to have a look at that and see if we can authenticate some of the detail.
I did try to corroborate it. I don't have the sources that you do, obviously, but I tried to corroborate the story and the date that around the proximity of the date they ascribed. I found two different journalists that were doing live casts in one of the cities. I think it might have been close to that, and they're used to the shelling coming in by that point. But there was such a large explosion in their background that it freaked out the cameraman. He's like, "What was that?" And his eyes went wide as saucers. That there was this giant blinding flash and sound that just ripped through them with the sound waves. That was an explosion beyond what they'd ever heard before in that war zone. And it seemed to corroborate maybe with close to the same night that this event that they were talking about, the lightning from the heavens. It could be, I don't know, but you would have better ability probably to vet that out than I would.
No, it looks like you've done quite a good job already in digging around. But if you send that to me, I can see what I can potentially find out about that, because Ukraine's obviously a real flashpoint at the moment. There's a lot of nuclear material and assets potentially in the area, which is known to attract. Send it to me, but that's a really interesting case there.
Yeah, that one really stood out to me, and if there's validity to it, it'll be growing exponentially in urban myth by now. And it's like 2 months ago. So
Rob and I have looked into other stories, and when it just comes down, it's just rumors, and we can't get any witnesses or anything. We have to put it in the trash pile because it's just it's a dead end.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you have to treat it. That's really how you have to treat it. And it's difficult because you got one faction of the community just saying, "Oh, but we need data, we need facts and stuff like that." Well, it's difficult getting that unless you got the technology, and that's why the government is so important, because the government does have this technology to track and find out this information. To confirm stuff, like we were mentioning satellite technology, and that's what's so frustrating, because unless unless the UFO research community can get together the funds to have their own satellite system and other sensor systems and stuff to kind of track this,
I think
billions. It's difficult.
I think for
Sorry.
this last UFO hearing that they had, they laid some seminal foundations of their case that they're wanting to present with the Wilson documents.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the other cases? The Rendlesham Forest and the Maelstrom Air Force Base, the nuclear event. They already know the answers that they brought out is their best case to try and then see what the military had to offer to explain that to them. They already know the answers of the validity to those incidents. They're just wanting the military to have to acknowledge that and come back and tell them, yes, we do know that that's authentic and we're going to acknowledge it. But it's curious to me what would cause the Air Force to resist so much that they would, what is it that they're afraid of or answering to that's above Congress and our Supreme Courts and our White House? What authority is higher than that they are balking at the intent of Congress? That's scary to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems to me that it's democracy versus kind of like an elite, which is non-elected, and you have to ask yourself sometimes. Is America only a functioning democracy to a certain extent? Is the UAP, does that still apply to the UAP issue when Congress is trying to get answers on that? Because America is supposed to be a democracy, and oversight is vital to any healthy democracy. You have to have the democratic oversight, and if you don't have that, to what extent can you really call it a 100% democratic country? And that's a tough question at the moment, and it would be good to perhaps speak to Burchett, Gillibrand, or Rubio, for example, to see what they would answer in terms of that.
Yeah, and Shannon brought this up a little while ago, talking about how we were advised that we might want for when they pass immunity, or even if they don't pass it, either one. If there are witnesses that want to come forward with what they know, but they want to be protected, like you're saying, that journalism integrity and protecting your sources, that we can do that anonymously and allow them, take their testimony and advance that for them, but not reveal who they are to protect them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of the whistleblowers, I mean, I've heard conflicting things on that now. I was very, very certain that whistleblowers had, I'm certain that, let's see how we put this. So I've got great sources telling me that verifiable information has been presented to Congress from whistleblowers. And I'm not sure at this case whether that verifiable information has been verified or not. I spoke to George Knapp about it, and George Knapp was basically saying that they've been given the locations for these facilities where craft and bodies are kept, which kind of like it really struck me, really, hearing that. But I was told by some contacts that the information had been verified, but other contacts have said actually it hasn't been verified. Nothing's kind of been proven yet, and we're hoping that whistleblowers do come forward. So I don't know what to think about that yet, but I got it from a very, very good source that verifiable information was provided to Congress, because at the end of the day, would Congress just take up this key language that takes up a major part of the Intelligence Authorization Act on whistleblowers and stuff like that and immunity if it wasn't doing this with good information? I don't know. I'm still uncertain where to go with this, to be fair, but I think that things should hopefully become clearer once everything's signed into law.
My 2 cents on this is that I believe through the process of us, Rob and I and others, developing this project for military witness protection program, or whatever we call it, that we will have a process to vet these folks properly. I told Rob I'm petrified if we ever get somebody who seems so sincere and they're just full of it. So we're going to have a process to vet these people properly. We'll get them a hold of the right people that can do that, who are trained to do that. Are you aware of our witness and case? We have cases in our that we work on, case number 2. Are you familiar with our case number 2?
No, I'm not, but could you please educate me? I'd be really
Oh,
interested to hear more about it.
sure. In the early 1990s, we had some Marines that were trained up on surface-to-air missiles. They're called Stinger missiles, and they were stationed at a security. They were doing security at a like a radar facility or something in Peru, South America. They one evening they got the word that there is a possible friendly aircraft down, and they needed these guys to go out and secure it. When they got there, long story short, it was maybe something not of this earth. And then the Chinook helicopters came in, and these individuals who were wearing black camis and no unit identification or name tags were bullying our Marines. They would zip tie them, handcuff them to these like gurneys, put them on these Chinooks, and then force them to sign non-disclosure agreements and or threaten them to throw them out of the helicopter. So that's the gist of it. So if you go back into our videos in the beginning, you'll see that I pick up this case, I contact this individual, and I talk to him regularly. And right now he's recovering from surgery. We're going to break the news to him, the things we've discovered and this new program. And hopefully, because he did tell me over the phone, I asked him, if ever given the opportunity to testify in front of Congress, would you do so? And he said yes. We're going to let him heal up, and then we're going to give him a call and see if he will play some ball, because he's very important. I believe his story too.
So is he a former Marine? Is he?
Oh yeah, he was a Marine. Yeah, he's a Marine.
So
yeah,
what
he got out.
See? What did he see in terms of?
There was a craft that was wedged in the side of a 90-foot cliff. It looked organic, I guess, and it had gills to it, which is strange. And he was really treated badly.
It was,
that's, the whole ET and the craft thing is cool. But what I'm interested in is how badly my Marine was, and Marines were messed with. No one messes with my Marines. I want a little
paybacks. Yeah. Whether we can prove the UFO part of the story or not,
maybe it's one of ours, but they shouldn't be treated like that.
And it was really interesting that there seemed to be a Chinese effort coming out in 2019 with Russia, which apparently was the aim of getting this out to the UN via San Marino, and they put together lots of representatives from different countries, like Gary Hesseltine from the UK, for instance, and that led to the formation of ISA when China just disappeared and just didn't want anything to do with it anymore. But it just made me think, because nothing gets done in China unless you've got the approval stamp from the communist government there, because they've got such tight control over the country. So it seemed to me to have the blessing of the state, and it just makes you think, what if there is this international cooperation taking place behind the scenes, especially when we're at the situation we're at the moment with Taiwan Straits and the Ukraine, whether there is any contingency plan to actually get this information out. Because I know that there are people in the US government trying to get this information out as quickly as possible, because we've got these situations at the moment which aren't sustainable.
We don't want our adversaries taking the global control of this narrative and leading the charge themselves. Reverse engineering and then sources of information for other countries. We don't want them being the head source of that have ambitions to take over the planet. That would not be a good day when they get that. If they ever reverse engineered that kind of tech, that would be a bad day for humanity.
Yeah. This is the thing. It's interesting just to think about all the variables involved and stuff, because you don't know what you don't know. So I just wonder what, like we were saying earlier, Holloman did take place. That suggests there is contact that has been established, and if there is contact that's been established, who's managing that contact at the moment. You don't know what you don't know, and that's that's such a difficulty when doing this story. It's there's so many layers to
It is.
when it comes to it. In 1992, a missile was fired by the U.S. aircraft carrier Saratoga, accidentally striking a Turkish destroyer in the Aegean.
I remember that. I was in. Yeah.
Have you ever had any rumors about that one? About what they thought
Well,
they were
yeah,
like?
I know. Basically, they went to general quarters. The USS Saratoga went to general quarters, and in combat, the position would be the operations specialist. The guy, the training officer, or the guy's chief or supervisor came over him and said, "Fire upon that ship." And he goes, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" So if there was a communication from a training scenario to a real scenario, was lost in translation, possibly. I don't know, but it was horrible. We killed a lot of people on that bridge of that Turkish ship. That was horrible.
Yeah,
I find it interesting.
Devastating. Sorry.
Deep Prasad, he's a young physicist. He calculated that the scientific method of Schrodinger's cat, things like that, are not valid because statistically, mathematically, he proved that if somebody witnesses inside the box, whether the cat's alive or dead, and they turn around, they relay it to another person, and then that person relays it to a third. Mathematically, he's proven that the scientific method that the person that observes that of saying that it's in there, that will not be relayed to the third person. There will be a disconnect between the three. Statistically, it shows that every time, if you run that enough times, there are going to be outliers where somewhere in between that guy seeing it and then communicating it, it's going to break down and not get an authentic message to the third person. That's going to break down somewhere. So in these instances, like with the ship, like on slide 9, that's terrifying, that taking over the human interface, it's like there's something that can intervene and statistically shows that there are different human paradigms of what they perceive from one person to the next, of what they observe. It statistically shows it will not be accurate according to other witnesses 100% of the time, the observer effect, that has to be thrown out because he can prove that they can take it over. And he was visited. The reason he's into this now, he had an abduction experience in his own bedroom, and he's the next Einstein that they say in the physics community.
Yeah,
so now he's full throttle.
Which I theorized the intelligence has the ability to surf our web like Transformers did in the movie. How you know that? World Wide Web.
Yep.
Yeah. It just, I mean, if quantum physics and everything is related to consciousness, and it does tie back to all that. Okay, then if you've achieved the ability to manipulate that technology, that physics, if you could do that, then you could control the human interface. You can control what we see, how we feel, how we perceive our reality, and that would be, you could argue, the ultimate weapon that you could come up with.
And they can create something out of nothing from our vantage point, and they can run it forward and backward in time from our perspective, within limits, I'm sure, but they could make it appear out of the quantum vacuum like it was magic, that they can construct a craft, and maybe the beings as well in some cases, like Gary Nolan talked about being drones. The ones that they're chasing through the streets in Vagina, those showed actual emotions and fear and things you would get out of a organic animal, even if higher, any kind of animal. Us as humans are animals, and when we're under threat, we're going to have fear. We're going to exhibit that. Some of the grays do appear to be hive-minded and drone-like, but in other instances, like you get in Brazil that James Fox is talking about, they're expressing genuine emotions of an organic being. But these other intelligences seem to be able to manifest out of nothing these experiences to where they have abduction experiences and things where they're completely clinical and not express any emotion. There's two different things in play here, fundamentally, at least, that we're observing and reporting. Half truth and half confusion.
Question for you both. Do you think we're dealing with multiple kind of like things like ultra terrestrials, extraterrestrials, just all the above? Do you think it's that, and then some are more advanced than others?
Absolutely. I know that for a fact from everything I have learned, which is extensive on ancient history and what I've studied in ufology now. I know this for a fact. And then you mix in all the legends, the myths, the religions, they all corroborate each other.
Yeah, it seems that there is a lot of them go back, don't they? In terms of like Christianity, it borrows a lot from Greek and Jewish traditions, and then you've got the Greek traditions that borrow from the Egyptian traditions, and it all just goes back, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then you've got crash retrievals like the I-beam from Roswell and Rendlesham, where they had glyphs on them that match up with ancient Proto-Hebrew and Sanskrit and demotic text, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Demotic is a combination between Proto-Hebrew and Proto-hieroglyphics. So it's almost toward Enochian or angelic script, but we see those on some of those I-beams that they put out and Sakaro that match ancient iconography. So that's how I made the leap on those that proved that we're dealing with, in some instances, with the same entities from antiquity that are here now still.
And when you talk about like probing or surveilling the battleground, do you think now like they're ready to pull the trigger, or do you think it's some other form of civilization?
My gut feeling, and a lot of people in the military especially, we see, and I've talked to some researchers that have been doing this for like 40 years of their life now, where they have been at this full throttle for decades. They have seen where members of the government and the military, they're in influential positions, and scientists, that they are being influenced, it seems, to these people that are trained observers and things, and research scientists of studying human nature, that they are indicating that they are doing atypical behaviors that lend either toward disclosure or also against disclosure. So they're being manipulated in some instances to have, they are being proxied as pawns for disclosure and against disclosure. So there's a battle being waged, and we're the pawns caught in between.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you never know who's talking to who as well. When it comes to this, you don't. It's very, very difficult to trust people, isn't it? Because you don't know who could be using who.
You
Discussions
have
happen behind the scenes.
I've always contended the only way that you truly know what anything is by observing it over time. And the best way to know what to expect is by looking back at history. The best indication of what's going to happen is what's already happened in at least matchable fundamental circumstances. So I look back at the totality of history and all the supporting literature evidence from every demographic, whether it's myth, religion, you name it. I compare all of that and collate it into one fundamental picture to try and understand what we're encountering. And like Jacques Vallée says, I think he's got some of the best vision on this, and as a scientist, of what this phenomena that is guiding humanity one direction or the other, that seems to be, like the Wizard of Oz scenario, or the projectionist in the booth. Most everybody's focused on the film, but only a few people are looking back at the light at the projection booth, and he doesn't know if that's a single entity, multiple entities, if that's a god, if that is advanced races, if that is an AI that's loose on the planet that's controlling all this. He doesn't know, and he can't speculate as a scientist. But then you have people like Michael Heiser that are educated in 7 different languages and all ancient religions, and Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. They all ascribe to the same systems that I have of studying, and they've all come to the same conclusion, that there are multiple things in play here that we don't understand, but there are precedences for all of this.
Didn't they discover like a skull, like a human ancestor called the Boxop Man or something like that in South Africa? And the skull size would indicate that it had a very, very large brain, and they were able to state that it had an average IQ of about 156. And for some reason, they died out, and Homo sapiens lived on. Yeah, it was. You would think that usually, like species of a higher IQ would be the ones that would live on instead of humans.
What they
And
consider to be modern man, 500,000 years ago, there was at least a half a dozen to a dozen subspecies of Homo sapiens that we would consider modern humans. That they have all died off except for us, and they can't adequately explain how Homo sapiens showed up 40,000 years ago, approximately, and coincides with dogs. They can't prove domesticated from wolves. It just seems that all of a sudden, Homo sapiens showed up, and domesticated animals showed up, and then 12,000 years ago, they can prove that simultaneously the ability to make these 20-ton pillars at Göbekli Tepe and the first place of farming and animal husbandry all rolled into one. That to me isn't the first start of civilization. That's the dying of another civilization that's leaving their legacy behind. But scientists conveniently leave out what they can't explain.
wow, yeah, no, absolutely. It's really, really. It's something I've always been really, really interested in. I watch lots of Randall Castle and Graham Hancock videos and stuff. It's just it's really interesting stuff, isn't it? We don't have any written record really going back that long, so history doesn't do very well if there isn't a written record. And even if there
is Indus Valley iconography of the imprints and the cylinder seals of like an ox and things like that. Prior to about 3200 BC, there is only the glyphs of these basic trade stamps or seals of families and things in Indus Valley and Proto-Egyptian and things of that like. Right around 3200 BC is when these iconographies started showing up, which is right around the point where there was in the proximity of the Mediterranean. All of a sudden, the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, and the Indus Valley, they all started trading with each other right around that time. And then it appears that there was a second set of casing stones put on the Great Pyramid, the Valley Temple, the Sphinx of basalt. It almost appears like something came in, recruited the local populations to supply these raw materials, put the casing stones on to withstand that flood. And like under the Temple of Djoser is where they found those 40,000 advanced pottery and things like that look like they're turned on a lathe that are in the Cairo museums and stuff now. That is an anomaly that evidently they were trying to erase everything that they could off the face of the planet of their existence. But somebody had stored these 40,000 artifacts that are high, you can only replicate them with machines. We can't figure out how to manufacture them because you're cutting obsidian. How do you machine obsidian without shattering it? You can't. We don't know how. But those were hidden away, and that's the outlier that survived the flood the last time around. But there's no written language prior to that. Nothing. It's gone. What can sanitize the planet of all language? There's not a broken saw bit. There's not a flooded garage that collapsed that has this kind of machinery in it that we know of. It's all gone. What can do that? But it happens.
Well, let's hope that we're not on the precipice of something else, especially.
Yeah. Applying that, it could completely eradicate all traces of us theoretically, and maybe leave just the Hoover Dam and the Great Pyramid still standing, in 10,000 years.
I mean, when you get Tom DeLonge getting people like former CIA directors telling him to put a part about the Greek gods within his books, then you kind of got to think to yourself, well, actually, are these same or similar conversations going on behind the scenes with these really high-level officials who are privy to a lot more information? It's something that I always take into account and something that's always in the back of my mind.
Yeah. You get the Greek pantheons, the North pantheons. You get the Watchers. You get the Apkallu out of the Sumerian tales. You get the Watchers out of the Hebrew. They are all one and the same beings that are described by different peoples that existed during those times. We can't dismiss that. Like a Holloman Air Force Base landing. They look like Egyptians, and that was only one of many competing factions back then.
Competing factions? You mean to say, because I've heard it said before, that after the nuclear bombs started getting tested and developed, that we attracted the attention of a lot of civilizations out there, and they all started coming here. So is that what you mean by competing?
Well, I think the bulk of them, if not all of them, were already here. It seems like, because prior to the 3200 BC floods, there were gods living among man. They in every culture, they talked about that. They had to pay their tithes. It wasn't going and giving a symbolic sacrifice. It was actually taking the food, the wines, and all that to the temples, and they were eating each day because they lived in those temples, like Hathor. They existed. They were real. And then that all changed. There was a new accord drafted, and this is, you read the Book of Watchers, the Book of Giants, and Enoch and the Old Testament. It describes that there was a battle for the future of humanity, and corrupt, where they were decimated and destroyed, and said, okay, we're going to do it different this time, and you're not going to screw with them. And you could apply that to what we see now and observe. We have not been overtly communicated with in over 5,000 years. That's completely opposite of what was happening prior to that point in time. So what do we think of that? It looks like they were abiding by a treaty to not intervene and stay out of it. They live in their existence. We live in ours until we're at a point where we affect theirs, and then they have a right to self-defense.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, it's you'd hope that there's some diplomatic relationship there, but it's been likened to a gorilla getting out of the zoo.
Yeah,
and if they can start threatening you and your family and stuff, you've got to make a decision. Do you let them out or not, or do you put them back?
But see, that's what people keep missing, is that they're in all these stories and lore and legends and history. It indicates that we have Overwatch. There is something benevolent looking over us. You don't have to believe in religion, but there are sentient beings looking that are pro-human and protecting us for what is not pro-human. That echoes all through our known history. So we've never been alone. We've never been without something that didn't care for us. I mean, if this was a jail planet, we would be in a bland environment, not all this beauty, and the ability to love butterflies. I mean, all this stuff is not food stock for keeping cattle. That doesn't fit the narrative. This is a design of a loving creator that didn't abandon their children, in my opinion.
Chris, I believe that in our lifetime, we're going to probably hear the biggest story in human history. It's going to happen. I believe it's going to happen in our lifetime. And I always tell Rob, we got the best seats in the house, and I'm just sitting back and just watching all this unfold. It's amazing times we live in, and I cannot wait to see what tomorrow brings. Like Lou says, at the end of the day, the truth will come out.
Absolutely, the truth will come out, and like I was saying before, like Lou is a wonderful human being, absolutely wonderful human being. He's so loving, so kind, takes care of people, and yeah, I mean, I think you guys can testify to that as well. That
absolutely. Yeah, when we had our interview with Lou, or it was a conversation among friends, actually, he suggested us to have why don't we hold a fundraiser for veterans and that are all dear to our hearts. And also he recommended Wounded Warrior Project that has tremendously helped Shannon stay alive. And Lou has a burden for pinups for vets. It's a small charity, but they have a really good model. And St. Francis No Kill Animal Shelter in Wyoming that he has evidently had frequent flyer miles with. So we came up with the name Shannon Scott's Annual Vets and Vets for Wounded Vets and Pets, because you got veterans and veterinarians that want to take care of these people and animals. So it just, that name just kind of came out of the ether.
What a lovely idea.
Yeah, and we have some new news about that. Late last night, I made the first order of a batch of 100 logo patches. So it would be my honor if I can get Rob's approval, because I'm only 50% here, and if he disagrees, we got to ask Lou to do a tiebreaker. But I would like to suggest that we hook up Chris here with one of our patches, our VIP patches. What do you think, Rob?
Oh, absolutely. At least one.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. That's such an honor. Thank you. And let me know where I can give as well, please. And I'll do. Yeah.
The description will be in the link below if anybody's interested. 100% of the proceeds. I don't know. Did everybody hear that? 100% of the proceeds go to these charities. If anybody has any questions about that, they can contact Rob and I. Okay.
Yeah. Don't make assumptions that we're going to be pocketing any money, because we are not. That is a vicious accusation that just is not. It's not conducive to helping veterans, because at the end of the day, if someone speaks out against a charity that is trying to help people, and even one person holds back from donating because of that, that potentially could be the deciding factor in saving somebody's life or not. If those funds are held back, where otherwise it would have gone forward, you could potentially be taking a life because you're interfering in the ability to facilitate that fundraiser. That's malicious. And, I hope people have some kind of a conscience at the end of the day to not keep assailing us to where we have to take time away from trying to get this launched to address these issues that we shouldn't have to be spending time on.
Yeah.
There's another aspect of that. There is a growing urgency to help veterans, because with what happened in Afghanistan last year, the pullout, the average 22 to 23 veteran suicides a day is going to escalate exponentially if we do not get resources out there to catch these guys, because especially the ones that fought in Afghanistan now feel disenfranchised because of that. And it's going to trigger, it's already started. There's going to be a tsunami of attempted suicides and self-medication, risky behavior, you name it, because they feel like all that sweat, blood, and toil was for nothing, but it wasn't. They sacrificed. We swore an oath when we joined the military to do that, to protect this country and the Constitution and our people to the best of our ability. They did that. They did that with distinction and honor. They took that country when Russia couldn't get it done in a decade. They performed admirably, and they, nothing can take that away. No occupation is going to last forever. No country lasts forever. As long as our troops held that country, it was thriving and functional. And just because Biden pulled the plug on it does not mean their mission failed. Biden failed that mission. They completed their mission, and it was a job well done. Biden is the one that made that decision to pull that plug, and he failed the American people and the Afghan people, not our troops. And they need to be reminded of that. And that's why I'm so passionate about this and seeing that wave that's building up. Yeah. We've got to get a lot more resources out in front of this to build more structures to catch these people before they fall. And you guys have had troops that fought there as well. This affects your country and my country. Both of our vets, the ones in the UK, us, our allies, the Five Eyes, they're all going to be suffering this.
One of my friends growing up, went to nursery with him, primary school, secondary school, went to a few gigs together as well to watch shows. He joined the British Army when he was 18. No, actually, I think he was 16 or 17 actually when he joined. And he went to Afghanistan, lost his life there, just got shot point blank.
Yeah.
Yeah, just family has never got over it, absolutely traumatized and
devastating. People don't realize just how much it affects the people that were directly affected. And I grew up in the culture of Vietnam vets. Of my uncles fought in Vietnam. A lot of my older friends all fought in Vietnam. I grew up without a dad. My mentor that I met when I was 13 until I joined the Marine Corps when I was 18, for 5 solid years, this guy was like my father to me. I practically lived at his house and was like the Karate Kid. He taught me martial arts, Aikido. It was learning guerrilla warfare and asymmetrical warfare from what he learned. You know, he's special forces in Vietnam, which, you know, that may not be appropriate in this modern age now to have done that with a kid. But, you know, he also taught me to not be a bully and only fight when it was absolutely necessary. But I grew up around these people, and the stories of my uncle, you know, with beer on his breath and getting tanked up, several uncles actually, and telling their horror stories by the fireside and reliving these horrors that they experienced in Vietnam. So I'm seeing that live out now 2.0 with our, you know, our new emergence of vets. And I'm in a lot more mature place now to where I can help these people. Whereas, you know, I was a child then, and I looked up to these guys. I couldn't help them. You know, I did somewhat by listening, but I didn't have the wherewithal to be able to affect their outcome. And they all died young.
And that's why we're taking on this second project, because what it does, it provides a service, and it provides a service to our veterans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here. Well, yeah, let me know where I can donate, and I'm happy to get involved and help you guys. So please let me know.
Definitely.
Very good. We're coming up on 2 hours. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up.
I guess like the parting message is that, look, more stories will come out, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be on the spear of those stories that come out, and there's lots to report. Expect more stories in both the Daily Mail and Liberation Times as well. If Congress doesn't do its job, you can bet your ass off that I'm going to try and do my job.
But it will happen. They can't stop it this time. We've got the internet that they didn't have in the 60s. We're going to make a difference this time around. They won't get it back in the bottle.
There's probably about 3 stories that I'm working on at the moment that are going to premiere in the Daily Mail. So there might be really, really big kind of worldwide stories. Can't discuss too much about them, just legalities and stuff like that. But they will be really, really good stories, all relating to UAP, but different aspects of it. And I think they're all going to make a really, really big splash, definitely. So yes, watch this space. We're going to keep on going. What I like to do is I like to ignore all the noise that goes on and just keep on pressing forwards, get the facts out, get the information out, get the credible testimony out, and that's how we do things. And it looks like this is how you do things on your show as well. So keep going, my brothers. Keep on going.
Chris, thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's very late there in the evening, and where you're at, it's 3:25 here, so that makes it 2:25 there, and it makes it 5 hours. So what's it, 8?
8:30. Yeah, about 8:30 coming up. But no, guys, this has just been an honor for me, just talking to you guys. You know, just been absolutely amazing. So just thank you so much for inviting me on, and please,
you're welcome back anytime. If you got something you want to break to the Yankees, man, you come over here on our show. We'll do a breaking news, just like the breaking news segment. And we'll let everybody know. But other than that, Rob, do you have any last words, sir?
I'm tremendously honored that you gave us your time and your effort, and I'm happy to see young people like you that have the stamina to get out in front of this and carry it on to the next generations and continue the fight.
I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe.
Daddy, you know what reflects all the colors?
The eagle color.
Daddy,
come over here. Come and talk to them.
it's a terrible color. Why?
You can
Daddy,
say,
we can close out the show.
You don't have to cut this. You can say,
just say goodnight, everybody.
I need.
All right. That's it. Like, subscribe, hit that notification. All right. Later.
I'll take care, all right? Nothing but love for you. Nothing but love for you. You think they have any clue what's about to happen to them?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night. Peace!